Tonight, a grim week for Northern Ireland, with the headlines dominated by the killing of Amy Doherty in Londonderry and the conviction of Natalie McNally's boyfriend for her murder in 2022. But what can the executive realistically do to protect women and girls? We'll hear from the five main parties in the Assembly. And they've just been granted a substantial pay rise. So what do our MLAs do on a daily basis to justify it?
I'm on 3 at the minute, education, I chair infrastructure and also democratic scrutiny.
I left the house around 8:30 and judging by my calendar this should end around 7:30, so I should be home for 9.
Hello. It's unrealistic to expect 90 politicians at Stormont to end violence against women and girls, but as the Chief Constable pointed out just a couple of days ago, if the PSNI doesn't have enough funding, then an essential part of the effort is missing. And how can efforts to tackle what's described as misogyny or toxic masculinity succeed if those same young men live in a world of hugely influential social media personalities? Two big questions we're asking tonight after a week of shocking headlines. I'm joined by MLAs from each of the five main parties at Stormont. The Assembly's official opposition leader, Matthew O'Toole from the SDLP, the Ulster Unionist Party's Deputy Leader, Diana Armstrong, the Alliance Party's Kate Nicholl, the DUP's Diane Forsyth, and Linda Dillon from Sinn Féin. Welcome to all of you, and thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. Linda Dillon, we gathered today's executive, spent some time discussing the scourge of violence against women and girls, and let's remember as well Ellie Flanagan, who was killed in Enniskillen at the start of the month. Now, the challenge, obviously, is to stop it happening again, and if there's a criminal justice dimension to that and a preventative aspect, then there are two issues for us to talk about on the programme tonight. First of all, do you have extra funding to give the PSNI to be more effective? And secondly, how do you take on the might of those big social media voices?
So there are two issues in terms of the PSNI. The first one is they do need additional funding, and we've been very clear and we're on the record. I'm on the policing board and we are clearly on the record as saying PSNI needs additional funding. And we've been very clear with the British government that they need to take on responsibility for legacy, because that would actually free up a substantial amount of money for the PSNI to actually tackle current day issues and particularly violence against women and girls. But when they get that additional resourcing, or with the resourcing that they currently have, they need to prioritise it properly. And that has been an issue in the past, Mark, where they have had funding, they have had resources, but they have not actually been targeting those resources towards violence against women and girls. So we had an issue where the Police Ombudsman did a report that clearly outlined within the cybercrime unit that resourcing was being targeted to organised criminal gangs and paramilitaries over and above violence against women and girls. And those are important issues, but 30 people have not been killed over the last 5 years by either of those. So I think that we really need to look at how the resources we have are spent. In terms then of those large organisations, in terms of social media, I mean, there's a massive piece of work. Obviously, it's not devolved, but that isn't an excuse not to do anything about it, because we have to work with our young people. We have to work with those who influence our young people here locally. But the British government need to seriously take on Facebook, Meta, all of those big organisations.
And maybe we need to have a better conversation about how we try to persuade young men who are influenced by the Andrew Tates of this world that those are voices they shouldn't necessarily be listening to. Maybe that's something we can do here on the ground as part of the sort of public conversation. The police will say, of course, that there are huge competing demands for their resources, and you'll know that Davy Beck, the PSNI's Assistant Chief Constable, told the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee this week that the force is probably, to quote him, under 300 detectives short of where we should be. And he says those are the individuals who would be responsible for actually dealing with this issue and tracking down individuals responsible for this kind of activity.
So as I said, we are very clear and on the record, PSNI need additional resource, and they do not have enough. They do not have the workforce that they need, and they do need more detectives. They need more officers right across the board, because our neighbourhood officers are really important too in terms of working directly with the community. So you'll get no argument from us in terms of the need for additional resources, and in terms of the influence of those people like the Andrew Tates of this world. There's really good work being done by some in our community around trying to work with young men, young women, but particularly young men who are being influenced by people like the Tates of this world and others like him. He's not on his own. There are people like that here on our social media, and all of the women, and Matthew, I'm sure as well, used to it as well, are being attacked day and daily. But the women in particular on this panel will be attacked every single day by misogynistic abuse on social media, and we really do need to take that on and tackle it. And you're right, we need to give leadership, and we will.
OK, Dan Forsyth, those two issues, I just want to hear your thoughts on how do you balance those issues, the real competing demands that the PSNI has in terms of its capacity to deliver within the budget that it has. And that's going to get more difficult because John Boucher, the Chief Constable, said on Wednesday that he's looking at a funding gap of £65 million next year if this multi-year budget goes ahead, which would rise to £96 million the year after that, and then £118 million by 2028-29. So that's one issue. Linda's addressed it, the funding that's available, and then we've got that wider societal conversation about persuading people about what is appropriate and what is absolutely not appropriate.
Absolutely, pardon me, and you know we're very much on the record that we recognise the underfunding of the PSNI and it needs to be addressed. But I think in terms of this issue around femicide, around the 30 women who have been murdered here in Northern Ireland since 2020, and you know our thoughts are very much with the families of all of those. And I just want to slightly take a different tone and just try to bring a little bit more of the victims' voices into this. Like the murders themselves are the tip of the triangle of violence. There are those 30 women who were murdered, but there are many more who are severely abused within their communities and within their homes. There are those who are abused and others know about it. There are those that keep it hidden. There's financial abuse. There's coercive control. There's a total tier here based on the misogyny within society. And I think that as we look to address that, we need to look at a whole of society approach to this. And as Linda said, we've got social media as a huge added value. We need to look right back to the start of this. We need to look back to our schools. We need to look to, you know, something as simple as the misogyny of pulling a girl's ponytail in the playground, to young boys in the classroom who think that it's appropriate to treat a female teacher in a particular way, right? As people are growing up, and you know, those of us that are the women on this panel, we have very much lived experiences of how women are treated right through different aspects of society. And the reality of a lot of these murders and a lot of this domestic violence is it happens in the home from people who these women are trusting, who should love them and care for them, and is a very personal, intimate form of violence. It's a very specific type of trauma, and a huge part of this, and we talk about funding the police, but the reality is these are really underreported crimes. Women don't feel comfortable or confident coming forward with them. There's a low reporting rate, and of those crimes like this that are reported, very few of them are seen right the way through to court or through to convictions. And you know, we saw the Natalie McNally trial this week, which was absolutely heartbreaking. But look how long it took that to actually come to court. And that sends a really difficult message to people. And that's a case of murder, which, you know, we'll see it right the way through. But for those who are actually getting abused in their home, for them to see that message of the PSNI saying they don't have the resources, you know, a lot of women who are being abused feel that their complaints are trivial to the police. They'll maybe not be believed, and it could take years and years to get there. So okay. I think it's a whole of society approach to the messaging as to what we do to inspire the confidence in the women to come forward, but to breathe that message to the boys and to the men in society.
Okay, Kate Nicholl, there is of course an executive strategy in place to tackle violence against women and girls with a budget of just £3 million. How could that ever be enough to deal with the problem on that scale?
Well, I mean, it's a challenge, and I think you have to look at it in different levels. As an assembly, we have to put what legislation we can in place. Naomi Long has really been focusing on that within justice, and in fairness, all parties have said that this is very much a priority. But as Diane has said, this is a societal issue, and it's so complex. And you know, every time another woman dies, the first thing you think is of the victim, and you think of her families. But I don't know about the rest of you, but then I think about the women who've been into my office. You know, a woman who's come in with her partner and there's been something a little bit odd about their interaction, or, you know, someone you know who has maybe told you a story one too many times about something that is just off in the relationship. And you think of them and you think, are they going to be next? And you know, it is so difficult it is so difficult for them to come forward, because it's not just a case of telling their story and saying what is happening to them. But if they have children, they're terrified that they're not going to be able to keep their children. They would rather stay in a relationship and know that they're at least there with their children. They're worried about finances. They're worried about houses. They're worried about legal support. It is this minefield. And if anyone is listening and anyone is impacted in any way, Women's Aid have a one-stop shop where you can go and they have all the professionals, legal, housing, all the support you can have. And that's what people need. And it starts in schools. It starts in how we talk to each other. It is 30 women in the last 6 years is not a statistic. It's a crisis, and we have to tackle it at every level.
I suppose the question is there now enough money in the pot for the appropriate amount of support to be given to organisations like Women's Aid? And again, to go back to what Davy Beck, the Assistant Chief Constable, said when he said he's 300 detectives short of where he needs to be. Those detectives are critical for a number of reasons, not least that they may well step in and apprehend and bring before the courts someone who's involved in one level of violence within the home before that individual goes on to become a killer.
Of course, they're such an important part, and you see how, especially how, there's some police in South Belfast who are doing amazing work. I see it all the time. It does need more funding. We've been very clear that it's been underfunded for a decade. We do need more funding, but let's not just say it's only about funding. It's also about what we're doing as a society, what every single person is doing in their own life. So as politicians, it's our duty. We need to look at the funding. We need to look at everything we can do. But every single person needs to think about what their role is. How are they raising their children? How are they calling out misogyny when they hear it? How are they supporting people who they're worried about? It is a societal problem that requires a societal response. And we do need more money, of course, but that's not all that needs to be done.
OK, let me bring in Diane Armstrong at this point. Where do you see the balance between this being a criminal justice issue and a whole of society issue about appropriate and inappropriate behaviour?
Well, I think that the other contributors have covered this issue very well. What I'm looking at is the need for a more rigorous court system, that we have perpetrators given the leniency of the law. We need to give confidence to victims that there is a procedure, there's a process there for them in the system that does not elongate their difficulties, it does not stop them coming forward, because we've seen perpetrators out on bail. We have seen victims who are in prolonged court cases. That means in the hope that those victims will actually drop the case, and you've got these perpetrators who are used to the control and using that same control to try and again intimidate a victim. So I think we need to look really carefully at a swifter justice and court system. We need to look also, we've been pressing in my party for mugshots of convicted abusers, that people know who these people are. So I think that's the awareness in society that there is zero tolerance of this.
And there must be frustration on your part and on your colleagues' part within the Ulster Unionist Party, not least the Health Minister, Mike Nesbitt, who I think showed his frustration when he gave some television interviews earlier in the week that the DUP's prevented the executive moving to introduce minimum unit alcohol pricing. That's something that the Health Minister and the Chief Medical Officer believe would help society in Northern Ireland in many ways. And we know that alcohol abuse was involved in many of these cases and in many more assaults, which we're not talking about specifically tonight. How do you square that circle?
Well, I think there are many factors in the behaviours that present in those who are committing violent crime against women. It's not just alcohol, it's mental health issues, it's trauma, that intergenerational trauma that has been inherited.
It's all of those things, but it is also, in many cases, alcohol.
In many cases, it's a stimulant, alcohol, yes. Now, we believe that the minimum unit pricing should apply. It is up to the DUP to tell us why it does not apply.
Well, it's not going to apply in this mandate.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
it'll not
already
apply
been
because
kicked
there
into the next
isn't.
mandate. If the
Absolutely.
next health minister, whoever that is, and it won't be Mike Nesbitt, decides to pick it up and run with it, but it's gone for now.
Unfortunately,
are you frustrated? He's clearly frustrated about that, are you?
Yes, we're totally frustrated because the general feeling I'm getting out there is people understand that these potent alcohols, these are the ones that we're targeting to have the minimum unit price.
Okay. I'm going to come to you, Matthew, in a second. Can I just come to you, Dan, for a second? That very, very, very quickly. You can see the frustration, and it's not just the Ulster Unionists who are frustrated at your party's refusal to move on that. Would that not be a small step in the right direction if you're serious about addressing the whole of society approach?
Well, I think that is a very unfair thing to apply to this, because the end violence against women and girls is such a serious issue. But in terms of this and the addiction and the alcohol part of those who are committing the violence, I think that, as Diane Dodd said in the Chamber this week, it's about an entire approach whenever you're talking about addiction. And there has been a lack over the past 18 months of investment in preventative, in the addiction services, in the detox. And it's not just about applying a piece of legislation to change the prices of alcohol that will change addictive behaviour, because studies have shown that those that are addicted will pay more to get it and potentially have other financial circumstances. But in terms of
it's another tool in the kit. Nobody's saying it's a silver bullet, but it could be part of the solution. It could be part of the solution. And if it might be part of the solution, is it not worth trying?
And I think that the entire approach to alcohol addiction is really, really important. As I said, the whole investment in the wider tackling of addiction, not just the cost of alcohol, tackling it at a root cause, tackling those addictions, and tackling investment and actually detox services to try to get to the root cause of that and how it applies.
The Chief Medical Officer might think that he's better qualified to make those judgments than politicians who aren't experts in the area. But look, I don't want to dwell on that any further. I want to bring Matthew O'Toole in at this point. Where's the balance for you on this? And if it is in terms of a criminal justice approach, where does the money come from to allow Davy Beck to get his 300 detectives and to ensure that the Chief Constable isn't looking at deficits running to £118 million in 3 years' time?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge something that will be fairly obvious to people who watch this programme, which is I'm the only male politician on the panel, and in a sense, when we're having this discussion, it's like the awful Pellico case of the woman in France who's been so brave and so eloquent about this appalling experience she was subjected to, used this phrase about shame being turned around. And there is a thing about men being involved in this conversation, because it's about violence to women and girls, but to be honest, it's done by men. This is male violence against women, and sometimes people are uncomfortable when you acknowledge that. But if this is a problem of violence done by women in this society, in particular in Northern Ireland, we have shamefully high levels. This is a very old societal problem, and it happens all over the world, but we clearly are an outlier in terms of the extent and intensity of it. So we need to think carefully about it, not just as a society, but also as men. So that does mean how we interact. Like earlier on tonight, lots of men have been watching football matches, and sadly, neither of the teams from this island did well. But you watch men interact in a healthy, positive way. But it's clear that some interactions of that kind are not always positive. So men need to be ready to address, talk, challenge healthily about what are unhealthy attitudes towards women. Earlier on, people talked about the online space. It's clear that that is a huge problem. People for profit or their own ideological reasons are corrupting particularly young men. There is extreme and violent pornography available at the drop of a hat for men and boys that is creating an appalling context. So we need to be ready to talk as men about all of these things and challenge them and not think that this is an issue that is simply affecting women, because it's being done bluntly by men to women. So we need to think about that. Secondly,
can I just pick up on what the Chief Constable had to say? He was pretty plain speaking when he addressed this issue yesterday. He said he believed there seems to be an acceptance around misogyny, which he had not seen before, and he pointed to what he called the abhorrent rise of online influencers like Andrew Tate, and said society needs to draw a line and say this is not acceptable. I mean, do you think sometimes when you're engaging in debates in the Assembly chamber, the language used by some of your male counterparts who are MLAs leaves, frankly, a lot to be desired?
Well, I think it's important that everybody who's engaged in public life is careful about the language they use. I also think it's important that
do you think everyone's as careful as he or she could be? Mostly he.
There are certainly things that are said in the Assembly chamber and other political chambers that I wouldn't use myself. But I want to be careful to acknowledge that healthy and robust political debate is one thing.
Of course.
And I do want to draw a distinction between that and some of what we are seeing online. I think part of the challenge and the really worrying thing, particularly if you're, for parents and people who, educators, is that a lot of this stuff is kind of invisible. It's kind of going on in this online world, and young boys are kind of all of a sudden coming out with these just appalling attitudes and things that they have seen online. And it's really, it's scary for parents, but it's scary because clearly part of the end point is violence against women, and in the most extreme cases, femicide.
Okay.
So we need to understand that. Just briefly on the criminal justice point, because Diana is right, we do have a specific challenge with, certainly in terms of upstream investment in the justice system. Yes, it's about police numbers. It's also about people, women who are, for example, availing of the services of Women's Aid. As Diane, has some professional experience of, there are people who are not even reporting to Women's Aid, and they're not even. So at every point upstream, women need to feel more empowered and confident. These are women who are suffering in many different ways. Make a report to talk to a friend or a family member, to make a report to Women's Aid, to access criminal justice services, all of those things. And at every point, to go back to the original point about them not feeling ashamed to do that, as it were, the shame needs to be turned around, and they need to feel ready and confident that there will be services and a justice system there waiting for them to deal with these issues.
Okay, Kate Nicola, I just want to come back to you because you were nodding there, and I think you were expressing a view that you do think that some of the language that's used by some MLAs in the chamber is inappropriate. At the same time, I want to put another point to you, and it's a point that I've heard being made by a number of your party's critics recently, which is that the Alliance Party of all the parties is maybe too quick to accuse others of misogyny. And if that's the case, does that not undermine a case where misogyny really is in play? If you accuse too many people of misogyny too often, when it isn't really misogyny, when it's just the cut and thrust of political debate, does that not actually undermine your case when there is a serious example that needs to be addressed?
I think that's a fair enough point. I think there's a difference between sexism and misogyny sometimes, and sometimes that's conflated. But there is a problem within the chamber, and that's not me being melodramatic. Emma Sheeran gave a very passionate speech the other day. I didn't agree with everything she was saying, but I admired how she was saying it, and people on the other side were telling her to sit down. I remember being told to sit down. The TUV pen that had the words of my colleague Paula Bradshaw written on it and then put in her pigeonhole. That's not normal behaviour. And when we're talking about violence against women and girls, we've got to look at all of it. The language matters, how we talk to each other matters.
The TV's not here, but Jim Allister's been asked about this, and so has Timothy
aware of
Gaston. And they're very clear that that's part of the cut and thrust of political debate, and it's not misogyny.
When we talk about the empowerment, just because we have talked about the empowerment of women, that begins with how they feel supported by others. So when you tolerate bad behaviour of any man or any individual, and you don't say anything and you don't challenge that. So if I'm being disrespected by a man in the chamber and Matthew doesn't say anything, or Diane doesn't say anything, or Kate or Diana doesn't say anything, that removes my empowerment. Because the minute I think other people accept it, then that removes my ability to stand up to it.
Clearly, in your view, set a very bad example for people who might be watching those very public exchanges between the people we're supposed to look up to as our leaders? Does it give them the green light to say that kind of behaviour is acceptable?
Yes, and I challenge it even when it's uncomfortable to do so. And I get attacked on social media for challenging it, and that people would say is the cut and thrust of politics as well, but it's not. Removing somebody's ability to challenge bad behaviour removes their empowerment.
Okay, would you challenge it within your own party as well? You would?
Absolutely.
Yeah, privately?
Privately or publicly, if that was what was required. I think we all need to be prepared to challenge it wherever we see it. I actually attended an event this morning in my own area in Coal Island that was put on by Crack Theatre. It's called Call It Out. And every single young person needs to see that. I came out of it, and to be honest with you, because of the things that I've witnessed, exactly what was described here, what we see in our offices every day, women coming in and we know when something's not right, or women coming in and telling us exactly what's happening to them in their homes, and they're afraid to leave because of their children and all of the other issues. And we could talk about the courts. I could talk about this all night, to be honest with you. But actually, it's one of the most hard-hitting things I've ever watched. I have never felt so emotional coming out of anything in my entire life.
Okay.
But young people need to see it and hear it.
Diane, for a second, would you call it out if you saw it in your party? Do you ever hear members of your party standing up in the chamber and striking a tone that you think is inappropriate, perhaps in the way they're speaking to other women in the chamber?
Well, I certainly would call out misogyny where I see it, but to come back to your previous point, like there are times I'm sitting in the chamber and I do feel, as you said in your previous point, a lot of people call out misogyny whenever they're not getting their own way. And as a woman, I actually feel, Linda talked about being empowered, it actually really makes me feel devalued, because as a professional woman my entire life, and I'm not saying this is the way it should be, you always work that bit harder to be seen as an equal through every environment, through my career in finance, through different sectors I've worked in, and in politics, pardon me, and in how you're dealing online. So whenever you're there and you're working really hard and you're being professional and you're doing a good job, it's really disappointing to see people call out misogyny whenever they're just not getting their own way. But if it is really genuine, and I do feel that it is genuine, I certainly am there and I'm supporting colleagues.
Did you feel uncomfortable, for example, when some of your DUP colleagues who were more than happy to publicly show their support for Donald Trump, the candidate during his first campaign for the White House, well before he ever became president, when his misogynistic views towards women were very well known? Did that make you uncomfortable when that happened? That was back in 2016.
Well, I think that my colleagues have made it very clear that the engagement and support is with the office of the president, and Emma Pengelly has been out there and took every opportunity.
This was before he was president, when his views on women were very clear during that campaign. So they weren't respecting or disrespecting the office, because there was no office at that point. He was just a candidate. And, he said some pretty shocking things during that campaign, didn't he?
Yeah, well, some of them obviously were regrettable, and I'm not going to, stick up for that sort of speak. As I say, I call out misogyny where I see it. I'm a female elected representative here in Northern Ireland, and I think that it's important that I stand up for myself, for other females in the community, and for those that I represent. And yes, bad behaviour needs to be called out.
Yeah. What about you, Diana Armstrong? When you hear the kind of language that makes you uncomfortable in the chamber, do you bury your head in your hands, or do you feel you should be getting up to call it out?
I feel deeply uncomfortable. It's not an environment that, it's a privilege to be in that chamber. It is not a slanging match. Okay, you have to be robust in your exchanges. But I also have engaged with other women MLAs after events, outside the chamber, to check that they're okay. So I think that's really important, that we do support each other, that is known and that is heard across outside the chamber.
Yeah. And in terms of how we move this debate forward now, from an opposition perspective, I mean, these parties are serving alongside each other in the executive, and we've identified how difficult it is financially at a time when the money isn't there in the amounts that we would like for so many of the different departments. This is an issue that seems to be cross-cutting in a way, and we've got a cost of living crisis. It is very, very difficult for the parties to actually move forward on this issue. What do you think they need to be seriously thinking about doing? I mean, apart from agreeing a multi-year budget, which there doesn't seem to be any sign of, what else could they be
Well,
doing?
first of all, multi-year budget does need to be agreed, and I think that is like...
We don't seem to be any closer to getting one, do we?
Well, not at the minute, and I think that is part of the challenge. And look, we've got 4 extremely impressive female politicians here tonight who I have a lot of respect for, and my job is to oppose and hold the executive and hold all their parties to account, and that's the job. But in terms of the executive working together, I think I would acknowledge that that the violence against women and girls strategy has at least seen more joined up and coherent communication than in certain other areas, and I think that's a good thing. It probably reflects.
But I mean, look, we had I don't know what happened to the executive meeting today.
Yeah.
We know that they discussed violence against women and girls, but we understand the executive decided to write to the Treasury again, asking for more money.
Well,
is that the best that we can do?
I mean, I do think this is a problem in our politics, which is simply kind of when something goes wrong, and by the way, I'm talking about much broader than the very important and difficult issues we're talking about tonight, there is a tendency of all parties to simply find someone else to shift responsibility to. On violence against women and girls, the clarity of purpose between the First and Deputy First Minister is broadly welcome. I think they do need to work to increase funding for the PSNI via a multi-year budget, and I think that kind of joined up government is hugely important. But I wish that they were able to do that for a whole range of other things, and they don't seem to be able to.
Okay, listen, I'm sorry, we're out of time. We've got to leave it there, but thank you all very much indeed for coming in to join us. Now, they've just pocketed a controversial 27% pay rise, and in just over a year, they're going to be looking for your vote. So just what does an MLA get up to on an average day at Stormont? Adam Mandeville has been finding out.
Morning, everybody. This is breakfast at the Martins. Are the boys smiling?
We kind of are. This is the start of the day. This is pretty standard every day. We have Lucy behind the camera. She's the camera woman. She's going off to Gillanola. Sam, who's being very quiet in the back, is dropped off at BGS, and then I drive on into work. This is me in work now, and this is my office. That's a Christmas gift from my son. He's a budding artist. Most MLAs don't decorate their offices, and that's fine, but I like to have some sort of personality to it. Look at this, Stormont Dog of the Year, second place. That's Maxwell. Oh, see, this desk is appalling. Morning, Ali, how's it going? Can I check with you, are items showing up in our sent items folder that we've actually sent this morning? A couple of committees, I'm on 3 at the minute, education, I chair infrastructure, and also democratic scrutiny. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. We're not yet sure exactly what time today's going to finish at. That's pretty standard. We get these sort of lists and there's some guesstimates as to where the day will end. I've got something from 12, 3 different things, 2 of which are at the same time. I'm leading a motion this afternoon at some point of this afternoon on eating disorders for the party. I'm going to do the view from Stormont, and I'm thinking that might be 6:30 to 7:30, and then after that I'm doing something in Donegal. I have briefed my wife. It will be 10 o'clock this evening. Yeah, it can be a bit challenging to manage it all, you know. Oh, okay, this is actually the basement. We don't want to go there. I'm hoping this is us. Come on. You had a day which wasn't ridiculous. Yeah. Today's just one of those.
A good day.
I'm not so sure. I wouldn't describe it quite as good, James. I'm having a busy day. Don't ask. The fear that I always have is that call, normally before 8 o'clock on a Monday, usually from the head of our press, saying, you know, can you do Nolan at 9? Now, he doesn't always get me. Sometimes he gets my P6 son, Zach, and that always makes... In fact, maybe Zach would be better doing the media with Nolan at 9. I need to get some lunch, and I need to get some cover for the Queen's guys who are coming in shortly, so that might mean a sandwich. Brian, you come on and say hi.
Can I do a supplementary for question 1? I don't know what the procedures are for the infrastructure minister. Is it just first come, first served in the chamber?
So I think it's first come, first served in the chamber, because that's been my sense of it so far. So Jess, that's the agenda, which I know you're all over, and you guys are happy enough?
Yeah, sounds great.
That's us, off to APG. That's me home. I stopped on the way home to pick up my son, Zach. I will get some emails done whilst watching Borgen.
Morning coffee to keep me alive. Hi, and welcome to my office. We have a policy corner over here. We have different bits of stationery, a coffee corner, so if anybody comes in, we can get them a little cup of coffee. So this was me looking much more youthful in 2019 when I was first elected. So I was 23 when I got elected, and my parents thought I was insane. Every Monday we'll have a morning meeting, and essentially we're given these packs which hold the debates for the day, questions to ministers, relevant party lines that might be important. Should I show you this? So I bought myself this because the job is really stressful, and I know the public often despise us all, and sometimes rightfully so, but I tell myself this time and time again that it's going to be okay. I have 2 things from my late grandmother here, and this is her mirror. So it means a lot to me, and when people use it, I always tell them the fun fact. I'm like, my grandmother would love this. I left the house around 8:30, and judging by my calendar, this should end around 7:30, so I should be home for 9. I sit on 2 committees, procedures and education. So outside of all that, we're also bosses in our own right. So we go to our constituency offices 1-2 days a week. We'll engage with constituents, but we have to take care of our staff. Then this morning, I just came from Procedures Committee. At 2 o'clock, I have Education Committee. At 2:30, I will be speaking with young people and a journalist. I have a 6 p.m. at Queen's. I have had 2 coffees already and it's 11:15. Yeah, I'm addicted. I have a real problem. If you took a look at my car, you would see there's everything in there from energy drinks to wedding invitations to workout gear. And as an MLA, you have like 5 different pairs of shoes because if you're going in a rural constituency, you're going to need like some type of welly. There we go. If everybody wants to wave. No 2 days are ever the same. And yeah, I don't take it for granted that I'm up here and have the most marginal seat, so I'm painfully aware of that and want to make sure I'm delivering while I'm here. I don't know what it is about the female experience in this building. The abuse is never ending. I spoke publicly this week. I've had my assembly email address used for pornographic websites. Someone tried to hack into my Facebook last week. I've had another attempt. I had to contact the police on the way to work today. When I first landed, one of the first things that was said to me was, "Be careful of the Stormont stone." And I was like, what, is there a magical stone? Some of us all know when you first get here, you're so stressed, you eat so much that you gain a stone. I was like, I can't be having that, and I did gain the Stormont stone. Sometimes it can feel a bit like the Big Brother house, like you're in here, everyone's yelling at each other, there's constant surveillance. I think politics is an interesting job, and I don't think it's something you could do forever, but then again, I enjoy it so much that I do want to stay in it. So it's, I don't know, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it'll be an interesting election, I think.
Well, it has just gone 9:30. I have called in to Chick-fil-A to get some dinner on the way home and a really lovely day in the Assembly.
Cara Hunter and Peter Martin talking there to Adam Mandeville, and of course other fast food chicken shops are available. We've let our DUP and SDLP panellists go since we've just been hearing from their party colleagues, but we've held on to the other 3. Linda Dillon, first of all, does all of that strike a chord with you? I was thinking the 3 C's there: chamber, committees, constituencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is a busy life, and that's not even taking in everything else that you have to do in your own community, because we're all politicians, because we're community activists at heart. So that's the basis of who we are and what we are. And I always say I put my mobile phone number on social media, because when people come to us, they're usually at their wits' end. They've tried everything else, so they need to be able to get you. So I think it's important that we are accessible, but sometimes that makes you very, very accessible. But look, that's the life we chose, and we chose it because we care about our communities. So that's who we are.
Kate Nicholl, does every one of the 90 MLAs put in the hours in the way that Cara Hunter and Peter Martin were seeming to do in that film?
I would say so. It's very easy to kind of score points, but we get involved because we want to make a difference, and we maybe have different ideas of how we would create that difference. But yeah, it's a busy job and it's a demanding job, but it's a wonderful privilege. But it's full. You've got committees, you've got the Assembly, you've got your constituency, and you just try to balance everything as best you can.
Yeah, and Diane Armstrong, so the 3 C's, chamber, committees, constituencies, we can add a 4th now, and that is campaigning. That's going to start very soon as well, because the next election's, 14 months away?
Yes, well, we'll be ready to campaign very, very soon. I think one thing we've missed here in the conversation is the skills that you need to develop are not just your political skills, it's also the managerial skills. You're managing staff, you're managing people. We will be out campaigning, managing our campaign. So yes, that's ahead as well, and that takes a lot of time and energy too.
Yeah, and look, I know you were a councillor before you became an MLA, but I mean, you're the newest of the 3 sitting in front of me at the moment. Was it a bit of a shock to the system? What was involved?
You need to be resilient. I mean, I travel from County Fermanagh, that's 1 hour 50 one way and 1 hour 50 home. So I leave at 7, I have meetings at 9, my day starts at 9 o'clock, again, like others, like Cara, back late at night, and you need a very understanding and supportive family. And
I need to ask you, Linda Dillon, very, very quickly, you'll be glad it's quickly, does the 27% pay rise help?
Well, I can say we're very clearly on the record to say that it should be in line with public sector pay, that it was an egregious amount of money. So I think that's...
All right. There's an answer that I could have anticipated, but I'm sure everybody else will agree with you as far as that's concerned, certainly at this table. Listen, we've got to leave it there, folks. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for tonight. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics at the usual time of 10 o'clock on BBC One. Do join me for that, and look out for the latest Red Lines discussion on Wednesday afternoon on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, from all of us, thanks for watching. Good night.